I am so psyched to see so many people here. They're like hanging off the balcony. It's just fantastic. This is, I've been here 15 years. I've never seen anything like it. So thank you all very much for coming. I'm Barbara Shatera. I'm a librarian here at the Fletcher Free Library, and we are absolutely thrilled to be partnering with Phoenix Books to bring Chris Bohjalian and Stephen Kiernan here on their rock and roll book tour. And I could not be thankful enough for every one of you being here, because you'll make it a really great night. I'm going to ask you, if you haven't already, to silence your phones to avoid any future embarrassment. And also, if you need the restrooms, they're one flight up. Around the corridor here, there's a stairwell and an elevator. Elevator is M for mezzanine. You can take the elevator up to the restrooms. All right, I'm going to now turn this over to my cohorts at Phoenix Books. Renee Reiner will come up here and do an introduction and give you kind of a background on this event. And then after that, Mike DeSanto, the other co-owner of Phoenix. And thank you again all for being here on this lovely day. Thanks.
What, you think I'm short?
No. Shorter.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Robert. My name is Renee Reiner. I am co-owner of Phoenix Books. I, too, am pretty excited to see you all here. And want to thank you for joining us. It's a pretty exciting night for us as well. I want to share with you a couple reasons why I love what I do. Community is very, very important to both me and Michael, my partner and husband. And because it's important, that's why we chose to open a bookstore in downtown Burlington when we had that opportunity. And because, as many of you might know, we didn't have the capital to do that. And so I said, oh, well, we'll just raise money from the community, because this is Burlington, and Burlington wants a bookstore in our town. And I put that out there. Thank you. And here we are, right? Another reason I love what I do is because we get to collaborate with some great folks like the Fletcher Free Library and RETN, our media partner, and working like that is also pretty great. And folks like Stephen and Chris are my colleagues. I mean, how cool is that? It's actually really pretty great to be able to get up here and welcome you to an evening like this. Some housekeeping. We do an email newsletter. It's a terrific way to stay in touch, to let you know about things that we do at the bookstore and at the library, etc. We do not bombard with emails. We do not sell your information, though I could make a better living, sorry. And it's by far the best way to keep you informed of what we do. So there are a couple of clipboards. If you're not already on our email list, please feel free to sign up for that. Other events coming up, Ben Hewitt is coming. He's the guy from Craftsberry, that writes about food and saving money and all those great things. And also Sue Halpern, A Dog Walks into a Nursing Home, is coming in a couple of weeks. And if you get our email newsletters, you'll know that sort of thing. We have a couple of great kids programs, a summer reading program, and we're doing Find Waldo in July at both locations. The raffle. So folks received this coming in the door. If you haven't, there's still an opportunity. This raffle I will collect. This is a raffle to win Chris Bohjalian for your book group. There are a couple of stipulations. If you're not in a book group, he will take, and you're the winner, he will take you and a couple friends to lunch at Lunig's. The stipulations we are going to, Chris is going to pick the name at the end before we're signing, I think. Yes, before Stephen and Chris start signing, he will pick the raffle winner. So you'll have, I'll collect up these and get them in the box. You must be present to win, and you must be within 65 miles driving distance from Lincoln, Vermont. And if you are not, Mike DeSanto has agreed to host your book group at Phoenix Books instead. I assume either location. Yeah, there you go. So that's what these forms were for. Please visit us at the bookstore. Please tell all your friends about us so that we can remain vibrant. Please buy Chris and Stephen's books, a lot of them, and thank you again for coming. Mike DeSanto is next.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I don't normally use microphones because I have a big voice that goes with it, so we'll see how this works with a mic in front of me. The first thing I want to do is thank Barbara Shatara, Ruby Simon, and Robert Resnick for the most fantastic librarians that I've come across. This is great. We are also thrilled that over the last months, we at Phoenix Books have invested in some software and stuff so that we can work with the Regional Educational Technology Network, commonly known as RETN. We're pleased to have them as our media partner here tonight doing the recording. These programs will be aired on the Champlain Valley on RETN Channel 16 on the Comcast and Burlington Telecom cables. And it'll be available for online viewing at retn.org. So when you get to the question and answer period, you too can have your 30 seconds of fame, if not 15 minutes. So what we usually do with this is I'm supposed to announce that this is your last chance to pass in those little forms if you want to win Chris, most graciously offering himself up. So if you have the forms, try and get them moved in. Maybe somebody can help pass them through. I want to take a moment to mention two upcoming events at Phoenix Books in Burlington. One is Ben Hewitt on Thursday, July 11th. His book is called Saved, and he's the author of the book that was about the town that food saved, which is about Hardwick and the community-supported enterprises that were going out there, and which formed the model for what we did here in Burlington. So we're really thrilled about Ben Hewitt. The second one is one of the librarians here has come up with a book called Legendary Locals of Burlington, Vermont. And he will be at the store on Monday, August 5th, and that's our very own Robert Resnick. Oh, no, Robert has corrected me. He's really thrilled with this environment here, this venue, so we'll be doing that book here.
It feels like home.
And so, I'm going to take a quick moment to introduce the two authors tonight, which is why we are all here. I'm going to start with Stephen Kiernan, a journalist, resident of Vermont, graduate of Middlebury College, Master of Arts from Johns Hopkins University, and an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop. He's written two earlier works, Last Rites, which promotes better end-of-life care, and Authentic Patriotism, which calls for a much higher level of civic engagement. His book, which is just out, is called The Curiosity. It's his first novel, and I am pleased to let you know that the film rights to that book have been purchased already by 20th Century Fox. Congratulations. The other half of the rock and roll book tour is Chris Bohjalian, a New York Times best-selling author of 16 books, including The Double-Bind, Skeleton at the Feast, and Sandcastle Girls, and soon, I suspect, The Light in the Ruins, especially after this evening. His books, by the way, have been published in 25 languages. I was quite stunned to find that little fact out. And there are 3 films of his works, if you care to look them up and get them from some source. The 3 are Secrets of Eden, Midwives, and Past the Bleachers. And he, as well as Stephen, both live in Vermont with their families. And Chris, you can still catch up with him once in a while, I've been told, on Sundays in the Burlington Free Press. So, without any further part on my efforts, I want to bring Stephen Kiernan and Chris Bohjalian to us. Thank you very, very much for that introduction, Mike.
It is a pleasure, it is an honor, it is a privilege to be here at the Fletcher Free Library, hosted by Phoenix Books, one of the world's great independent bookstores. And I can't tell you how wonderful it is to see all of you, the medieval monks of the digital age. Because you still care about what words and reading and books can mean to the soul. Welcome to day one of The Light in the Ruins and we weren't kidding. We really do have t-shirts, and we will be giving them away during the question and answer portion of this evening. This is day one of our book tours, and as I've shared with many of you in Chittenden and Addison County, we all presume that book tours are unbelievably glamorous. You jet around the country and you hang with Terry Gross and Oprah Winfrey. But when you are not in the enclave of the Fletcher Free Library under the wing of Phoenix Books, it can be terrifying out there. Here are 3 moments from 3 recent book tours to give you a sense of how grateful we are to be with all of you. Number 1, I'm on an audio panel in New York City. On my right is Adriana Trigiani, known best for Brava Valentina, the Big Stone Gap books. And on my left is Alan Tennant, naturalist. He's just published his memoir, On a Wing, chronicling the weeks that he spent following peregrine falcons as they migrate from Canada to South America. For the first 15 minutes, it's very egalitarian. Adriana's getting questions, Alan's getting questions, I'm getting questions. 15 minutes into this gig, however, I look to my left and I see being rolled across the stage a crate the size of a dishwasher, and oh dear Lord, it has air holes. And I think instantly what W.C. Fields once said, you never ever want to perform with small children or interesting animals. I know what's in that crate. And sure enough, my worst fears are realized when Alan Tennant gets out the glove, the big leather glove with the ties and the buckles and the stays. His assistant releases from the crate a proud, majestic peregrine falcon, and for the next 45 minutes, Adrian and I are completely invisible. I could have said, I know who's winning Dancing with the Stars, and no one would have cared. After 45 minutes, there's a question from the very back of the auditorium, and the moderator says yes, and a woman in the back row says, I have a question for Chris. So I sit up with the toothpicks in my eyes and look attentive, and she says, you haven't told us anything about your new book. I don't know. How are the reviews? And before I can answer this lovely, underhand, slow-pitched question, the bird, which is still on Alan's arm, poops. Peregrine falcon poop is the size of poodle poop. Everyone can see this. So the moderator, before I can answer, looks at the poop, looks at the bird, and then says, exact quote, well, we know what the bird thinks of his book. Moment number 2. I've just finished giving a reading, and now I'm signing my books, and the bookseller has brought some of my older books, including Midwives, with the big, beautiful Oprah's Book Club logo in the upper right-hand corner. So I'm signing these copies of Midwives, and a guy leans way over into my personal space and then says with conspiratorial glee, I'll bet those Oprah stickers really help. And I said, yeah, kinda. And he said, I just self-published a novel about vampires in a Trans Am car cult. It's really bloody. And I said, okay. He said, want to tell me where you got those stickers printed? I won't tell. And finally, there is this. I am in Seattle, Washington, speaking at the Seattle Public Library, but that afternoon, I go to a bookstore called Elliott Bay Books to sign my books. And I go into this bookstore, and there are no signs of my new book on the new table. There are no signs of my new book on the walls for book groups. There is no signs of my new book in the wall of fiction. So I'm thinking to myself, because the book is number 6 on the New York Times bestseller list, okay, they've sold out. But just in case, always the running slime dog of capitalism, I went up to the woman behind the counter at the bookstore and said, "Hi, I'm Chris Bohjalian. This is my new book. If you have any copies, I'd be happy to sign them." And she looks at her computer and says, "Oh, yeah, we ordered 3. She then takes me to the back of the store, and there they are in what is called the overstock section. Shaquille O'Neal couldn't reach them. And I said, ever the good guest, "Well, if you'd like me to sign those books, I'd be happy to." And she says, and this is an exact quote, "No, I'd rather you didn't. Our readers are very discriminating." But happily, none of you are discriminating because you are here tonight. Thank you. I can't tell you what an honor and a privilege it is for me to be standing at the dais with my great friend, he's like a brother to me, Stephen Kiernan. Many of you know Stephen as a neighbor, you know him as a dad, you know him as the editorial page editor for years at the Burlington Free Press, where he won virtually every journalistic award imaginable, including a Polk. Many of you know him as the author, as Mike said, of Authentic Patriotism or Last Rites. Still, the Bible in hospice care in this country. Make no mistake, those are 2 very, very important books. Well, now he's going to tell you about the curiosity, and I don't want to steal his thunder, so I'm just going to share with you one moment. Back in 2010, Stephen and I and a great friend of ours, Dana Yutton, Middlebury playwright, were doing this midlife writer cliche thing and going for a bike ride in Tuscany. So we were biking around the Tuscan hills, eating ridiculous amounts of pecorino cheese and consuming lots of Chianti. And one particular night, Stephen and Dana and I are sitting on the balcony of a granary built in the 14th century. The stars are perfectly aligned, and we're talking about books and stories. And Stephen shares with Dana and me this kernel for a novel that he wants to write. And I was transfixed. It sounded wonderful. In 2012, he shared with me a first draft, and you know what? This was the first draft. It was even better than that idea he had shared 2 years earlier on a balcony in Tuscany. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my good buddy, Stephen P. Kiernan.
I'll take care of that. Okay. Shall I give this to you? All right, I'm going to bring it down here. Well, hi. I would be nervous right now, except that this is a room full of people I love. It's true. Tons of them. The other day I was listening to I was following a book blog. You know, a bunch of them have got me writing guest blogs for them and that sort of thing, and I was following this one group that was having a conversation about how old is too old to publish your first novel. They decided 40. So I've got 5 years to go. That's not funny. Yeah, the idea for the curiosity does date back a little bit, actually to 1992. And, oh, thank you. 1992, which I realize is before most of you were born. But what happened is that I was courting a woman who lived in Ripton, Vermont, right up against the Green Mountain National Forest. And whenever she wanted to create a certain atmosphere, she would put on this James Taylor album, New Moonshine. Now, I love James Taylor, but I hadn't listened to him in many years. I didn't know he was still recording. And there was one song that no matter what we were doing, I was always very distracted by, because I thought it was an okay song, but it had the ingredients of a terrific novel. It had science and religion in it, and he had some kind of social commentary elements. It just needed something to kind of hold it all together, and I didn't know what it was. Well, and then I was very occupied with my writing career as a journalist. I was also still writing fiction. I wrote a novel called The Wall of Silver, that was full of sex and violence. And I think it was so bad, I believe I have now finally tracked down and destroyed every copy of that. After that, I wrote a book called What We Could Have Had, which had some violence in it and some sex. And that one also didn't get published. Then I wrote a book that was about seeing eye dogs called Moonlight Sonata, and that one got 35 rejections. Probably not enough sex and violence is my guess. Not sure. All that time I wanted to write this idea that came from the song, but I was missing something. So now we jump to when Chris is kind enough to invite Dana Yetten, who's a playwright in Middlebury, some of you may know, and I to join him in Tuscany for 8 or 10 days of bicycling. And you know, traveling with writers is fantastic because somebody always has a story. This is great because Tuscany has really steep hills, and you get to the top of a hill and you'd be panting away, and one of these guys would ride up next to me and say, "One time there was this hill." You were good, you had 10 minutes of good recovery time. So there was this night that was very expansive, and these guys said, "Tell us about the next idea." And I went on at some length about this thing that was almost there, but it was missing an ingredient. And when I was done, there was about a 10-second silence, and then Chris said, "What this novel needs is a beautiful woman." And what Dana said is, "And she has to be smarter than all the other scientists." And I said, "I'll be right back." And about 9 months later, I had a draft, which is what I share with Chris, and it's been, you know, a terrific ride since then. And what I found out when I put this woman in the story, who was beautiful and smarter than the other scientists, is that suddenly the political commentary and the science part and the social part was a little bit less interesting. And in fact, the main male character and the main female character, I couldn't turn my back on them for one paragraph. If I just went over here just to describe the painting on the wall, I'd turn back and they'd be whispering together or they'd be walking off holding hands. And believe it or not, there I was writing a love story, whether I meant to or not. And so it is a science-y kind of book and a little bit of a science fiction thriller thing. And it does have some social commentary in it. And yet it's above all a love story. So I'm going to read a little bit from it, and very, very, just a couple of minutes of it. But I thought that, you know, if you have your emblematic love story, what's the emblematic moment? It's when boy meets girl, right? So I'm going to read you the boy meets girl moment. I just like so much having this thing in my hand. You just can't imagine. Yeah. Thank you. They did a beautiful job, I think. That'd be great. So what you need to know about this is there's a woman, there's a guy named Erastus Carthage who has a lab that has been taking pieces of icebergs that contain little tiny creatures in it, shrimp, krill, sardines, and he puts them in a little kind of salty soup with a little electricity, a little magnetic field, and he can get them, if they froze to death, he can get them to reanimate for a minute and a half, something like that. So the book opens with a research vessel in the Arctic Ocean, and it's about 800 miles north of the Arctic Circle, and they have found an enormous iceberg, and they're looking, it's full of stuff like that, full of shrimp and krill and so on. Boom. And lo and behold, there's a big carbon mass way down on the bottom of it, and they think, "Oh man, a seal. We've got a seal." Or maybe an immature narwhal. This is so great. So what do you need to know? This part of the story is being told by a hack reporter from Intrepid magazine named Daniel Dixon. He uses a swear word in here, but I think you can all handle it. I'm not sure about Dave, but everybody else, they can handle it. And what's happening is that there's a crew in the water that's working away on the iceberg, and there's a guy in the control room, and he has a video feed in front of him, and whenever the diver says mark, he presses a button, and there's a photo on a big screen above him that captures. And Vermonters will appreciate this in a way that no other part of the country will. Our intrepid scuba diver's name is Kate Philo. For a state park, I see from my writing desk. Mark, she calls, and the screen shows a flipper extended downward away from the seal's main body. It's a slender animal, I'd say, almost 6 feet long, maybe 2 feet wide, though it's hard to tell exactly through the blur of ice. Then the video feed shows an underwater circular saw biting into the hard ice 2 feet from the flipper. Either these people are incredible actors, every one of them, or maybe, just possibly, They genuinely believe they can harvest this animal in the ice and bring it back to life. The implications, which I have denied relentlessly until this very moment, are boggling. There are something like 40,000 people around the world who are cryogenically preserved, waiting for a day that technology enables them to reawaken. There are another 60,000 people at any given moment lying in hospital ICUs with an incurable illness. Imagine if they could be frozen in hard ice till a cure is found or some anti-aging medicine developed and then reanimated. There are almost 100,000 people awaiting organ transplants. Imagine if you could freeze the bodies of recently dead people, then thaw what you need for parts later. It would make transplanting like going to the fridge for a beer. I can't believe I'm starting to think like this. Most of the researchers are rookies, so I understand why they would drink the Kool-Aid. But Professor Gerber? Hey, mad scientist, I call. Want me to freshen that coffee for you? He does not take his eyes from the screen. What'd you say? Coffee. You want some more? He doesn't answer. Dr. Kate says, Mark, and he snaps the image, then turns to me. I'm sorry, what? I hoist my mug at him. Coffee. He turns back to the monitors. Help yourself. Then he checks his watch. Hey, Dr. Philo, I'm looking at our clock here. There's silence in the radio. Then she squawks on. And? You know you have 4 minutes till ascent? 3 minutes, 44 seconds, she answered. Not that you're counting. Nope. Mark. He presses his button. The image freezes on the overhead screen, long chisels working a cleft in the hard ice. It's like defrosting an old-style freezer with a kitchen knife, only underwater, and you're inside the freezer. Her radio squawks again. Can you tell from there how close we are? Definitely, Gerber nods. I'm worried about that flipper getting too thin a boundary. Exposure would compromise. I only want to know what species we have, then I'll let it be. You and your curiosity. Just be careful. That berg is starting to destabilize, and the fragments are bigger. As if to prove Gerber's point, a slab of white the size of a minivan breaks free. There's a groan through the monitor, like a whale giving birth. The slab spirals lazily onto its side, then grinds along the underwater face of the berg. Divers rush away in all directions, kicking their flippers furiously. One scrape from a beast like that, and your suit is torn, immediate frostbite, or it brushes your air hose, and you're dead. Kate hasn't moved, though. She's fixed on her carving like a jeweler cutting diamonds. That woman can concentrate, I'll give her that. Gerber snaps a photo of the ice block as it rises, silently, trailed by offspring the size of steamer trunks. The other divers gradually swim near again. Call it a shift, lovely, Billings says into his headset across the room. I'll be in after you straight away. Dr. Kate does not answer. Now only inches of ice lie between the specimen and open water. I see how the flipper fans open at the end. It looks like the wingtip of a hawk, the way feathers spread when a big bird glides. That fragment did us a favor, Kate says, but this is one awfully skinny seal. Gerber shuts his music off completely, rolls his chair forward till his nose is inches from the monitor. What the hell is that thing? I'm standing beside him now. Fuck if I know. Should I tell her it's 40 seconds till ascent? No one answers. We can see the crew working beside the animal, wedging it toward freedom. It's almost ready to come away. Wait, team, Dr. Kate calls. Hold there. The video feed shows her swimming deeper under the very bottom of the iceberg. Shine a light back this way, she says. A diver leans in her direction to show the specimen in silhouette. The ice is cloudy, full of air, so the seal looks suspended like a work of modern art. Next, Dr. Kate positions herself farther below. She's set aside all her tools but a brush, and she's using it on the last piece of ice along the flipper. Hey, Dr. Philo, Gerber says, you okay there? We're a major race for breaking the hard ice seal. You know how we mothers worry. Instead of answering, she beckons to the cameraman. The feed blurs as he flippers his way down, then settles near her hip, pointing the lens upward. Billings leaves his computer and crosses the room to see what's happening. The other technicians have all gone silent. A beeper announces the time for ascent, but Gerber slaps it off. Everyone's watching the monitor now. Mark, she calls, and Gerber presses the button. The screen shows a shadow, reaching, a dark something. Dr. Kate maneuvers beneath the animal, then releases a huge exhale. Fat bubbles rise into the pocket around the flipper, trapped in the ice's shape for a moment, then escaping to one side. It's like an underwater caress. God in heaven, Billings says. She's melting it with her breath. "Mark," she says, as a layer of ice separates, falling away. "With the backlighting so bright, the flipper is taking a clearer shape. Silly as it sounds, I can't help asking, does that look to any of you like a baseball mitt?" Gerber squints at the screen. It does, kinda, only smaller. As the next breath bubbles upward, Dr. Kate reaches high and hooks her gloved fingers into a tiny crevice. She tugs twice. Billings whispers, "Careful." All at once, the ice falls away, a big plate. Someone gives a yell. Divers rush in, blocking the camera. "No way," someone shouts. "Impossible," says someone else. "Mark," Dr. Kate yells. "For God's sake, Gerber, Mark, Mark." Billings stands in my view until I elbow forward so I can see. By then, the divers have collected themselves. The video shows Dr. Kate restraining them in the black water. "Gerber," she says, her voice stern like a cop's, "clear the control room." "Say again?" He looks around himself. At some point, he has stood up. "Clear the control room at once. Also, secure this video and the backups as proprietary and classified." "All right, everybody," Gerber says. "You heard her." Billings steps away, and the technicians all rise from their chairs, 2 of them poised to escort me from the room, but I remain concentrated on the big screen overhead. "Tell her it's too late," I say to Gerber. "Tell her I already saw." "Saw what?" he says, leaning back to squint at the screen. And there it is, blurred by ice and bubbles, but undeniable. "What is that?" "Just what it looks like," I tell him. "A human hand." Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yay. Didn't you kind of want to know? So this is going to be time to discuss this more, but what I want to do for the moment is get out of the way so you can hear from Chris. You know, everybody in this room knows that Chris Bohjalian is an enormously successful author, right? He's probably second to John Irving, most books ever sold by a Vermonter, and I can tell you, yeah, it's amazing. And I can tell you that is not easy. It takes enormous talent and it takes enormous work, and that's what he does. But the thing that I need to share with you is that he is every bit as successful as a human being. He has been a fantastic friend to me for many years, in many ways, most of them secrets. But I will tell you, there I was on that trip because of his generosity. He gave me the idea that made this come together. He helped me with introductions to get a better agent for my representation. He's been a guide every step of this. And then when his publishing date got moved to the same date as mine, well, let's just say, you know, it was more than a kindness when he immediately offered to have me join him for part of the rock and roll book tour. So I have to say, one of my favorite things about this book is the dedication, which I decided on 6 months before we knew what the pub date or the tour was, and it is to Chris, my endlessly generous friend.
I just like to have Stephen with me because he chooses really good beer. Thank you for that introduction. The Light in the Ruins actually had its origins in 2 moments on 2 continents. The first moment occurred about a block and a half from here at the Flynn Center for the Performing Arts. I was watching a lyric theater production of West Side Story. It was directed by Ken Wolvington and Stan Greenberg. I don't know if Ken is here tonight, but if so, we've got to give Ken a big shout out. And I know Cindy Zook, the executive director, is here because I saw her, so a big shout out to her as well. I saw a lot of that particular production of West Side Story because my daughter Grace Experience was one of the Shark girlfriends. That meant I saw a lot of rehearsals, and I saw every performance. And I was struck consistently by how entranced I was by Leonard Bernstein and Jerome Robbins' reimagining of Romeo and Juliet. And I knew at some point I wanted to write my own Romeo and Juliet. I've always been drawn to stories of doomed lovers. When my books are at their best, Midwives, The Double Bind, The Sandcastle Girls, they are about, first and foremost, dread. You're invested in the characters, and you are terrified for them. So I knew I wanted to tell this story, but I didn't know where or when. That would come a few years later. I was biking in Tuscany. You must think I'm always biking in Tuscany. I'm not. But it is clearly very fertile ground for my fiction. I was biking with a friend of mine named Greg Lewandowski, who lives there. And we parked our bikes atop a hill and looked across the narrow valley at the village of Montisi. And he said, "Do you see that granary tower?" And I knew that tower well. It had been built in the 14th century to rival the great tower in the Campo in Siena. And my friend Greg said, "It used to be a lot taller." I said, "Really? What happened?" He said, 1944, the Nazis tried to blow it up. They didn't want the Allies to use it as a spotting tower. They failed. Then he shrugged and said, "Man, did they build things to last 600 years ago." But I thought about the presence of the Nazis in Tuscany. Certainly, I understood that the Germans had been in Italy in World War II, but when all of us in this room think of Tuscany, we think of sunflowers, we think of Chianti, we think of sheep and pecorino cheese, we think of under the Tuscan sun. We don't think of the Nazis. But for 6 months in 1944, Tuscany was an innermost ring of Dante's Inferno. Florence was a battleground. Every bridge but one was blown up by the Nazis in July of 1944. Moreover, the Nazis were executing Italian civilians in reprisals for partisan activities at a ratio of 6-1. One German officer killed, 6 Italian civilians, or 12, or 36, or 72, would be lined up against a wall and machine gunned. Meanwhile, the Italian partisans and Mussolini's Italian black shirts were in the midst of their own civil war. The result? For most Tuscans in 1944, well, they were the grass beneath the feet of battling elephants. So I knew I wanted to set my Romeo and Juliet not in Verona, but in Tuscany. My Romeo, a 22-year-old German lieutenant named Friedrich. My Juliet, an 18-year-old Tuscan girl named Christina, who's not just any Tuscan girl. She's the daughter of Tuscan noblemen, a Marchese and a Marchesa, and she lives in a spectacular villa that up until this point has been untouched by the cataclysm that is the Second World War. She's living at the villa with her sister-in-law, Francesca, Francesca's children, her niece and nephew, and her parents. The villa is built beside some Etruscan ruins, hence the name, the Villa Chimera. Chimera, of course, will become the American word chimera, or chimerical. But for the Etruscans, the chimera was a violent, terrifying, 3-headed wild beast. Serpent, lion, and goat. Yeah, I don't know about the goat. But in any case, it was fierce. And that was the name of the villa. And that was going to be the book, their doomed love story. But the book took one of those left-hand turns that I just cherish in other books that I've read. One of the secondary characters, Serafina, exists only to be a parallel to Christina. She's also 18 years old. She's a partisan. And while Christina is living in this villa, Serafina is living in the woods. Her parents and brothers already executed by the Nazis. In one particular scene that I wrote, a firefight with the Nazis, she is so horrifically disfigured, burned, that she became instantly my Lisbeth Salander, my girl with a dragon tattoo. I fell in love with Serafina as a character and knew she was going to be way more than an ancillary character. And the result is that her paths and Christina's will cross. 10 years after the war, in 1955, when my Serafina is the first woman in the Florence Police Department, and she's investigating the murders, one by one by one, of the remnants of Christina Rosati's family. Most of the book is third-person omniscient. Alternate chapters, last year of the war in Tuscany, 1955, in Florence. But there are also a few first-person brief interludes. Let's begin. Thanks. See, this is why I love to have him with me. Yeah. But some of the interludes are from the perspective of an individual who has a profound grudge against the Rosati's. So I'm going to read two very brief sections. I'm going to read the first of those first-person interludes. It opens the book. And then I'm going to skip ahead to 1955 and introduce you to Serafina. A woman is sitting before an Art Nouveau vanity, brushing her hair in the mirror. It is, at least according to the police report, somewhere between midnight and 3 in the morning on the first Tuesday of June, 1955. For dinner, she ate a small portion of an impossibly rich pasta at a restaurant popular with wealthy American and British expatriates 5 blocks west of the Uffizi. She has since bathed, soaping off both her own perfume and the cologne that was worn by her dinner companion. The fellow who had come back to the apartment made love with her on the thin bed no more than 3 feet from the vanity and then left. He was a suspect in the murder investigation, but only briefly. If he had had even the slightest inclination to spend the evening, there's every chance that I would have executed him that evening too. At the moment, she's wearing her nightgown, which is not especially revealing, though at some point very soon it will be cut off her. Yes, cut. Not even pulled over her head. Sliced from the opening at her collarbone down to the hem, which, when she stands, is mid-shin. By then, of course, she will be dead, bleeding out. I will have sliced open her neck from one side of her jaw to the other. Just so you know that Art Nouveau vanity is not particularly valuable. The white paint is chipped, and 2 of the whip-like finials along the right side broke off years ago, before the war. Moreover, her nightgown is cotton, and the material has started to pill. I mention this so you're not envisioning the room as more glamorous than it is. The woman is still beautiful, even now in middle age, and despite the horrific, seemingly unbearable losses she endured a decade ago in the last year of the war. These days, she lives in a neighborhood of Florence that is solidly working class, a section that tourists visit only when they are impressively, almost hopelessly lost. A decade ago, she would not have known that a neighborhood like this even existed. The apartment has neither a doorman nor a primitive intercom connecting the wrought iron and frosted glass street door with her modest unit. It is locked, but not all that difficult to open. Really, it wasn't. Then I moved silently up the stairway to the 3rd floor where she lived and knocked on the door. She rose from the vanity, her brush still in her hand, and paused for a moment on her side of the wood. "Yes?" she asked. "Who is it?" And here I lied. I said I was her dinner companion, speaking into my gloved hand to muffle my voice. So she opened the door and would be dead within moments. And why did I slice open her nightgown? I didn't violate her. It was so I could cut out her heart and place it in the ashtray on the vanity. A woman with the lilting name of Francesca Rosati, who had once been a Tuscan Marchese's daughter-in-law, was my first, but, as you will see, not my last. And this is your introduction to Serafina Bettini. It is 1955. Serafina understood that her living arrangements were scandalous and would probably have shocked her family. But because her family had all been dead since 1943, she really didn't care. She had one of the 2 bedrooms in an apartment on the south side of the Arno with a beautiful view of the river and the hordes of tourists that had begun to crowd the Ponte Vecchio in search of bargains in silver and gold jewelry. Her roommate was an American banker named Milton, who was nearing 40 but still had a thick mop of magnificent red hair, cheekbones that most actors would have killed for, and a male lover closer to Serafina's age than to his, who was a purser on the transatlantic SS Cristoforo Colombo. Whenever the Cristoforo Colombo was docked in Italy and the purser came to Florence, Serafina would make herself scarce as a courtesy to the pair. Otherwise, however, she was content to serve as Milton's beard and live in a neighborhood in an apartment that were well beyond her means. Milton paid the lion's share of the rent, and most people, including the other detectives, presumed he was her lover. In reality, he was her best friend. Given the numbers of people that he too had killed in the war, twice with a knife and once with only his hands, they shared a wistfulness and a rectitude and, when they really thought about it, a guilt that was rare in the cafes on that side of the river. In truth, Serafina had no idea whether her family would have been disappointed in her because they believed she was sleeping with a man out of wedlock, or disoriented at the idea that her closest friend was a homosexual. Her family had all been slaughtered before she was old enough to have a definitive sense of which was worse in their opinion, premarital sex or living with a gay man. The night after she had seen Francesca Rosati's heart sitting black and still in an ashtray, and then had espresso with Christina, she got home well before Milton. She poured herself a glass of wine, got a pack of matches, and thought about the Rosati family, as well as her own. Their families were demographically identical, or at least close to identical. Both she and Christina came from families of 5, and they both had a pair of older brothers. In other words, the two of them had been the babies of their families, the youngest child and the only daughter. Christina, of course, still had a mother and a brother. Serafina had no one, and had had no one for nearly 12 years. Christina, the two of them determined, was 9 months older than she was. Now she sat in her high-collared blouse and skirt in an ornate wrought iron chair on her and Milton's terrace, her bare feet on the balustrade over the river, and watched the sky grow dark and the lights emerge across the river. She had most of her weight on her left side, as she did always when she reclined, careful to keep the back of the chair from pressing against the thick pink scars that spiraled like ornamental filigree from where her neck met her skull to her waist. It wasn't painful when anything pressed against them. Instead, she would experience a tingling around their edges and then a disconcerting numbness in the center. It was as if her back was hollow, which could all too quickly take her back to those long days of agony when she awoke and there was little that anyone could do for her. They told her they had thought she would die. Among the first words in response, they said, was that she wished she had. Apparently, she had begged for them to shoot her. Today, she hid both disfigurement and disability. Only Milton knew that she was unable to raise her right arm over her head, but he wasn't worried. He told her one evening, shrugging, that he never expected her life would depend on her ability to shoot a bird from the sky. Now, she lit a match and let it burn for a moment before blowing it out. Then she pressed the still smoking tip hard against the skin on the inside of her thigh. She did this 3 times, tossing the 3 burned matches into the ashtray, and decided she did feel a little better when she was done. She recalled what Christina said as they were talking on the street outside that depressing little cafe near Francesca's apartment. At least they're all together now, meaning Francesca and her husband and their 2 children. This wasn't a clue in Serafina's opinion because it was evident that whoever had killed Francesca hadn't been trying to effect a heavenly reconciliation. Rather, it spoke to how unkind life had been to the woman and how far the Rosati family had fallen since they had lived in that villa. Behind her, she heard the apartment's front door open and recognized the sound of Milton's keys falling upon the glass-topped table in the entryway, and then the footsteps as he strolled through the living room to the terrace. He leaned over and kissed her on the cheek, and she could smell a vestigial trace of the sandalwood lotion he had rubbed on his face after shaving that morning. "So, any mayhem and madness today?" he asked in Italian. "Or were the Florentines too done in by the heat to kill one another?" "I saw a human heart." "Where?" "In an ashtray." "That's disgusting." The rest of the body was far worse. He sat in the chair beside her, his elbows on his knees and his chin in his hands. "Is that a new suit?" she asked. It was a summer-weight gray pinstripe, the lapels cut into deep, sharp triangles just below his collarbone. "It is. Do you like it?" "I do, very much." "Tell me about your day," he said gently. Clearly yours was far more grisly than mine. "Thank you very much." Thank you. Now, as Stephen and I said, we weren't kidding. We really do have Light in the Ruins and Curiosity t-shirts for well, we've got a number of them, but the first ones we want to give out are to the person here, because we've taken up a lot of your time, and now it's your turn, who wants to ask a question. The first one to me gets a Light in the Ruins t-shirt. The first question for Stephen gets a Curiosity t-shirt. And there's the first hand. And the question is for me.
You get most of your creativity on accent or descent?
I will. I'm going to repeat the questions. The question is, do I get most of my creativity on descent or ascent, referring to those Tuscan or Addison County gaps that I love to bike? As a matter of fact, I think I get creativity from both the uphills and the downhills, and this is not a metaphor for life. It's just the fact that the more time I spend on a bike, the more the thoughts percolate. Jay Perini, another immensely gifted Vermont biographer, poet, and novelist, once said to me that he thinks the most valuable tool a writer can have is a walk. For me, it's, as you just murmured, a bicycle. It's a chance to clear my head of everything. And I cannot tell you how many times I've pulled over beneath a tree in Addison County and pulled a pencil out of my bike shirt pocket and scribbled a scene or sent myself emails from my iPhone with a scene I wanted to write. And you get the first Light in the Ruins t-shirt. Thank you for being so brave. See that toss?
I'll run them out for you.
This could be for either one of you. I realized that, we get so involved in the story that we're reading, but it occurred to me not so long ago that there's an enormous amount of research that has to go into it. Where do you get your information? Once you get your story, where do you go? Like that, like under the sea, with the iceberg.
The question is, where do you get your information for the stuff you make up? I'll tell you what. To me, I feel like it's an advantage that that I've been a journalist for decades, because I really feel like the muse is never hurt by a trip to the library, and so you can learn an enormous amount. And so, for example, there's a part of my book that takes place in the early 1900s, and there's a song that was sung when the Red Sox won a game that actually became a major plot element. Likewise, there's some experiments that people are doing with cells right now. It turns out I thought that reanimation was this crazy leap, but it turns out it's not, actually. There are 2 elephants right now that are impregnated with embryos that have woolly mammoth DNA. Do you know about this? It's true. And they're also very, very close to a successful same sort of slicing DNA approach with doves. They're going to bring back the passenger pigeon. And there are people, they call it regenesis, de-extinction. There are all of these things, and it's, of course, racist. And we're not allowed to talk about it. Anyway, the point is that research really helps a lot. And for that, a Curiosity t-shirt.
Questions for you, Chris. When I first read Midwives, I had to look up your name to realize that you're a male and not a female, that you weren't Christine, that you were male. When you're writing from a female point of view, what do you do inside your head to get there? How do you adjust your thinking or your mindset? What happens when you do that?
Yeah, the question is, going back to midwives, how do I write across gender? And I'll tell you, my favorite review I've ever gotten for any of my books goes back to December 1996. It was the Library Journal Review for Midwives. And this is the last paragraph. Among the many benefits of this fine novel is the candor and honesty with which Chris Bohjalian writes about her experiences in birth and what it must have been like for her to be in labor. I love to write across gender, and there are a lot of reasons for that. The main reason is that your gender is way more interesting than mine. I think the only reason why golf was invented was so that men would talk to each other. But, as Stephen can tell you from writing, from the perspective of Kate Philo in The Curiosity, there's something really emancipating about writing across gender. I think that is true for women writing from a male's perspective as well. It begins with that great leap of imagination where you begin with all of those things that link us as people, all of those sensations that are as real for you as they are for me, and then you begin to layer in the gender-specific idiosyncrasies. But, the book I have coming out next summer is narrated 100% by a 16-year-old girl from Newport, Vermont. And I can't remember ever being this dialed in to a character. Yes. Wait, I'd really like to do the T-shirt canon. Do you mind? Do you mind? Okay, because this. Okay, I only had to go through. I had to go through 3 rows to get to you. I need to go. You're ducking. That's smart. Stephen and I were practicing this all week.
This is a question for either of you. I wonder if, as you go on the tour and you meet people from other states, other countries, if there is a perception of what a Vermonter is like, and if there are any preconceived notions about what you as Vermont authors must be.
The question is, as you travel around the country, do people have a particular perspective on you as a Vermonter? And I think I want to share a couple of the perspectives that I've heard on the road, because I did a lot of traveling for my prior books. I can tell you that when you're in Manhattan and you tell somebody that you live in Vermont, they say, "Oh, full-time?" It's true. And there was a chapter in one of my books that involved people who are involved in the heart transplant community. It had me in very southern Missouri and Kansas, and there you don't say you're from Vermont. You lie because no, you say it, but they will immediately recoil if you are in really conservative Kansas. People up in Vermont are crazy. They believe in things like evolution. And they're not to be true. So the answer is yes, but mostly, in all seriousness, most places, if you say that you're from Vermont, it's as you would expect. That you immediately have it's great because for me it's so completely undeserved, but you immediately have this glow of authenticity. You're from Vermont. Oh, it happens a lot. And in Florida, people say we thought about retiring there. So yes, it's an asset everywhere you go.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that is, like Stephen, I'm so proud to be a Vermonter and to represent Vermont on tour. I see Governor Kiernan is here tonight, who was an inspiration, of course, for the governor in Water Witches way back in 1992. And Stephen is absolutely right. Vermont, when we are at our best, are a moral compass that the rest of the country can look to. Yeah, why don't we do that?
We have a question for you. One of the things that we have a question for you, and it's just this. We're curious, and it's completely about the fragility of our little artistic egos. But we want to know who came the furthest to see us tonight. And so the first question is, can I see the hands of people who came more than 100 miles? God bless you. Oh, yes, you rock. Okay. Okay, wait. 200 miles. You rock. You rock. 300 miles. More up here. 400 miles. 500 miles. 600. 700. 1,000. 1,000 miles. We have 2, 3, 4, 5.
Where are you from?
Florida.
California. Good, I think California.
California is so far back. How many rows is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. Okay.
Yes. Yep. You had a question, yes.
For my T-shirt, I was the
What's your question?
Oh, I asked about the Vermont question.
Oh, you asked a Vermont question. Oh, I just want your T-shirt. But it was caught by one of the world's great accountants. Thank you, Richard. Yes.
How does the name rock and roll relate to this tour?
Yeah, how does the name rock and roll relate to the story? There are two answers to that. One that is genuine, one that is puffery. We'll give you both. Do you want to do the puffery? I'll do the genuine. Puffery? Okay. Here's the genuine, and then he's going to do the puffery. Here's the genuine. For years, in a bit of self-reverential, narcissistic irony, I started printing these T-shirts to give away at these events with the venues on the back as if they were rock and roll T-shirts. And I did that because I used to really hate going to readings where the author would stand at the microphone and read in a monotone for 30 minutes and everyone would be falling asleep. So I wanted to elevate the experience, wanted it to be more fun. So that is one of the reasons why. But then there's another reason that is actually a whole lot better soundbite.
I wanted to steal it from Chris because one of my characters he's a mad scientist. His name is David Gerber, and he is kind of a systems analyst guy and a mathophile and I guess a polymath, and he's very, very bright, but his brain is not entirely under his control. And so the way that he controls himself is he puts headphones on a lot of the time, and in fact, when he's thinking really hard, he even wears a bicycle helmet and then the headphones when he's sitting at his computer. And then it's like, so then of course the opportunity for the writer is what music is he listening to in those headphones. And I tried opera and listening to opera when I wrote him, and it really didn't work. And it was about a month into the writing of this book that I realized that this guy was a hardcore deadhead, which is why you heard Grateful Dead playing when you came in here. And so then I, stole it from Chris because we have rock and roll playing as people come in.
That's a much better answer. That is a much better answer.
My question is, as an educator, at what age did you begin to write, and did you have mentors as like parents or teachers that led you into the...
Sure. The question is from an educator, and I think we'll both answer this one. At what age did we start writing, and did we have mentors, and did we have educators? And I'm going to tell you the bad and the good. We'll start with the bad. I have never taken a creative writing course, but not for want of trying. My sophomore year in college, I wanted desperately to be in the creative writing seminar offered by the writer in residence at my venerable institution to determine who would be among the few, the proud, the chosen. In the class, you had to submit a short story before the December holidays. She would read it, and she would let you know in January who's in and who's out. So in early January, I am summoned to the brick monolith that housed the English department at my college, and I went to her office, this novelist whose work I loved, whose work my mother loved, and there she is. And she motions me in, and she says, "You're Chris, I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name." And I sit down, and I see my short story in front of her. And she sends it across this expanse of mahogany to me as if it is roadkill and says, "Well, Chris, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name. I have 3 words for you. Be a banker." Which would not have been bad advice except for the fact Ralph Bales, my economics 11 econ professor, had said to me when I was failing, "But what does it matter? You're going to be a writer." So there's the bad. Now here's the good. The good is my mother, who was just constantly championing books and championing my work. And I amassed 250 rejection slips before I sold one single word. And never once did my mother or father doubt that I was eventually going to sell something. I think they were just hoping they would live to see it.
It's funny how similar my experience is when I, you were hearing my credentials earlier, and I got a master's at Johns Hopkins, and the guy you worked with was a very small 9-person graduate program, and the professor that you worked with on your writing was John Barth. But this is at a time when everything was experimental literature and postmodernism, and I was just, I'd gone to college in Vermont, and I was telling stories, and when I had my first 3 stories together for him to consider, and we had our office hours, he said, "Have you considered medical school?"
Wow.
Now, unlike Chris, I had a much larger gift from my parents in terms of my writing career, which was that they deeply opposed it every step of the way. When I was 21, I applied to the Bread Loaf Writers Conference for one of their fellowships, and I knew if I got it that I'd be the youngest person who ever did. And I was applying in poetry. And I was away visiting my brother at college when the letter came, and my mother read it to me over the phone, and I'd gotten this fellowship. I was very excited. And I came home, and there it was classic. My mother cut out on my pillow was a headline from the New York Times: "Average U.S. author makes $6,000 a year." The good news part of mine is that I've always loved reading. I still read voraciously. I'm an omnivore. If just any chance I get, anything I can read. And the other is that I come from a very large family, and I'm on the young end of it. So when you were at the dinner table with the 9 of us there, and you were on the young end, if you opened your mouth, your material had better be good. And so I learned to be an extravagant liar. And so really what I've done since then is just try to find a way to make a living telling the lies I told around the dining room table. That's a small. A curiosity one, a front row toss.
We'll go here, and then we'll go all the way to the back.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, did you ask a question?
I did ask a question, didn't get a shirt.
Okay, we've got 2 left. Go ahead. I've got a small light in the ruins. Is there somebody in your family who'd love to have a small light in the ruins? Okay.
Medium?
Do you have a medium? There are 2 smalls.
No, normally you don't get one for every
I have a large curiosity.
Okay. Put it. Put it.
Yourself from one set of characters that you kind of embodied for so long, still be a part of that life, and yet, have the presence of a current project kind of infiltrating that timeline?
The question is this: given the great time that it takes to birth a novel, how do you juggle the fact that I'm working on the 4th draft of the book you will see next summer right now, set here in Vermont, yet I'm talking about Serafina, and here's another confession. My emotional soul is still heavily invested in Hatun, Nivart, in the Sandcastle Girls. I just returned from historic Armenia, and it'll take me decades to let go of that book. What you hope happens, and I say hope, because it doesn't always happen, is that there are 1 or 2 characters in each book you care about so passionately, you have such an emotional link to, that you can reconnect instantly. So I can reconnect in The Light in the Ruins with Serafina right away. In 3 weeks, when I'm back in our beloved Vermont, I will reconnect with Emily Shepard, the narrator of that book. And whenever I'm talking about the Sandcastle Girls, which I have the privilege of doing often, it's not hard to find Nivart, Armin, and Hatun. Shirt. Okay, so we're going to do, this is the last shirt, but we'll each do 1 more question. And I'm going to try to get this all the way back, because I really wouldn't need the t-shirt cannon.
Chris, I'm gonna give you a second to do that by answering that question a little bit too, about how you love characters and let them go. And actually, the way that you don't let them go is because of you. Because readers come and they say, or they write you, or they email you, or they call you, or they stop you on the street and say something about the work that they liked. And it brings it right back for you. You know, you see on the cover of the Curiosity, there's that button for the letter O. There's a button that's a symbol throughout the book. And, you know, some people have read early editions, and lo and behold, one of the early readers gave me a button. And so it's a way that the reader gives back. It's part of, when Chris says that this is an honor and a privilege, it's exactly that what you do by let these stories rattle around in your heads and maybe move you, make you laugh or cry, that when you share that back with us, it makes it very, very real and rich and rewarding.
That's lovely. Okay. We're going to do 2 last questions. We're going to do this gentleman and then that lovely lady.
Regarding characters, is there a history of how you select the names? Is there some personal relationship? And how does that compare with the average author to us?
How do you choose your names? Is there a process? Beside my desk is a baby book, a phone book, and just shelves of authors' names. Sometimes the name means absolutely nothing. It's just a name you think is pretty. Clearly, I love the name Laura or Laurel because I've used it 4 times. Likewise, I apparently like the name Emily. I've used it 3 times. Sometimes, such as in the Sandcastle Girls or in Skeletons at the Feast, it's a little harder because you have to choose names that are consistent with the culture and the geography, but they have to be easily readable and pronounceable in English. So, for example, when I was writing Skeletons at the Feast, I wanted to make sure that all of my German and Polish characters' names were easily identifiable. In the Sandcastle Girls, I chose names such as Hatun, and Nivart, and Armin. Not always the most common Armenian names, but Armenian names that people who are unfamiliar with the Armenian language can pronounce. Now, sometimes a name does have metaphoric baggage, and I'm just going to tell you 1 moment when I gave it too much baggage. In Midwives, there's a midwife, and her name is Sybil. And throughout the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th drafts of this book, I had no last name for her, because her first name was Sybil, which is rife with metaphoric baggage and witchery. So the last name I was giving her for the purposes of remembering who she was Kiln, K-I-L-N. Was never going to call her Sybil Kiln, but I never wanted to lose sight of the fact she was a peace-loving, tie-dye, hippie pot thrower. That was Sybil. So we get to the final draft, and my editor says, "Got to tell you, we're going to Galley. You've got to give us a last name," and it sure as heck can't be Kiln. I was sitting in the living room in Lincoln of my friends Reed and Lisa Prescott. And they said, "Have you seen this issue of Country Home?" I said, "No." And said, "Look, Fred and Judai Danforth are in it." and thought, Danforth, that's a great name. Sybil Danforth. So the next morning I called Fred and Judai and said, can I steal your last name for a book? And they said, fine. And that was it. And the book became Sybil Danforth. The book was published in March of 1997. Cut to October of 1998. I'm visiting a high school in Claremont, New Hampshire, and an 11th grader says to me, I want to talk to you about that name, Sybil Danforth. And I said, sure. He said, don't you think it's kind of like sledgehammer imagery? And I said, oh, the Sybil, the witch stuff? He said, no, the Danforth. And I said, what's Danforth? He said, the judge in the crucible, the witch hanging judge, Danforth. I said, wow, you're good.
I only want to say one quick thing about names, which is this. Very late in my novel, there's a high school girl, and a teacher picks up her lab notebook to find that it's mostly empty, and that there's drawings of field hockey sticks, and there's a boy's name written repeatedly. And I had some fun thinking about who it was going to be, and you will see that that young woman's name is Victoria, and the name that she has scribbled all over her notebook is Chris.
Victoria is reading The Curiosity as we speak, by the way. I did not tell her that. I thought you'd be pleasantly surprised. So thank you. Okay, we're going to do that last question here. Hello, Jen. How are you? Jen was a huge supporter of the Good Fellas, the Cinder Fella auction. Thank you for manning and womaning up on that.
Well, I already know the story, but I wanted to ask you about Oprah and how you found out about her picking your book.
Sure. No. I'm happy to talk about. I'm thrilled. No. How did I hear that Midwives was going to be a part of Oprah's book club, and what was that experience? That experience was the greatest professional blessing I will ever have. No one has done as much for reading in the late 20th and early 21st century as Oprah Winfrey. Huge props to her, and I don't simply say that because, thank you, Oprah, you picked Midwives. The reality is that she's picked a lot of great books, and I'll always be honored to be on any list with Joyce Carol Oates, Toni Morrison, Wally Lamb, Andre Dubus. It's all good. So how did I find out? How did I get the call? Well, here in a nutshell is what happened. I had just returned from the Midwives paperback book tour. And Midwives had been a bestseller. It hadn't been a number one bestseller, but it had done okay. Get back to my house in Lincoln, Vermont after my first 14-day book tour, and I'm exhausted. And over the Monday of Columbus Day weekend, I'm sitting on our front porch in Lincoln, and I said to Victoria, I'm never leaving Lincoln again, ever. She said, yeah, you will by tomorrow. And the next day, while I'm at the gym in Bristol, the phone rings, and it's a man who says he's with an obscure book festival in Lake Forest, Illinois, at the home of the writer Chris Bohjalian. And she says yes, and he says, can I speak to him? And she says no, and he says, I'll call back. And Victoria says, we might be Vermont, but we do have outgoing phone service. He can call you. And he said, no, my boss wants to talk to him. Just, okay. So I come back from the gym, and Victoria is now going to the gym, and our 5-year-old daughter, Grace, and her friend Ellen are getting off the bus for kindergarten, and Victoria says, you're about to get a call from an obscure book festival in Illinois, be polite. I said, I'm always polite. He said, no, be polite. I know you're going to say no. So, meanwhile, Jackman's, the people who provide our LP gasser at the house, because I want to see if they can milk one more year out of my furnace, which I'm not making up, was from the Eisenhower administration. It was December 1959, according to the warranty papers. So I've got a bunch of cats. I got my 5-year-old daughter. I got my 5-year-old daughter's great friend, Ellen. I've got these guys from Jackman's, and the phone rings, and there's this woman on the other end pretending to be Oprah Winfrey. So finally, I let this go on. I said, yeah, right. Okay, who's this really? And she said, it's me. It's Oprah Winfrey. And I said, yeah, right. And then somebody starts laughing on the phone with her. And that's when I was, wow, this really is Oprah Winfrey. And here's the interesting footnote to this story. I don't remember the rest of the phone call. It's all a blur. But when I was chatting with Oprah about this later on, she said, do you remember the weirdest thing you said to me? And I said, what? And she said, you said something all along the lines of, I can't tell you what an honor it is to get to be on the selection committee to choose one of your next books. And I said to you, committee? What are you talking about? There's no committee. I'm the committee. And so that was how I heard that Midwives was going to be a part of Oprah's book club. So, okay. Now we're going to do two things. First of all, Stephen and I want to thank you so much. Really, we're so grateful you're here. Now we want to go sign books, and we're happy to sign our books, Jodi Pico's books. Tanya Lee Stone is here. I love Tanya's work. So she can sign her books. Though normally I would sign Tanya's for her and be damn proud to do it. The other thing we're going to do is I'm bringing the lovely and talented Renee, the Vanna White of Phoenix Books, because I am going to be joining some of you for dinner or for lunch, and I can't wait. I am going to be joining Linda Hartwell. Linda, this is lovely. Thank you very much. Good. So, with that, I want to give a spectacular shout out for everyone at the Fletcher Free Library, for everyone at Phoenix Books, two great bookstores in Essex Junction and around the corner from here on Bank Street. I got to tell you, I cannot tell you what a great gift it is that Mike and Renee and Colleen and Todd and the whole team have taken a flyer on a bookstore, because the thing about books, and can I see the curiosity? The thing that makes books special, and Stephen lobbied aggressively, I lobbied aggressively with our publishers, in the digital age, we want our books to be totemic. We want them to be beautiful to hold. We want them to be works of art. So you will notice on both books, deckled edge pages, raised type, and burnt edging, because we want books that you will cherish and share. Thank you.